Thank you. So I'm Benjamin Young, and today I'm going to be talking about the Qapekbehtian scripts. It is a family of writing systems. We've had a lot of talk about writing systems today, but I here want to specifically talk about a family of writing systems and an exercise, a sort of mind practice in creating a family of writing systems that all are related. Not going to go over all the Qapekbehtian scripts today because I want to have some time at the end for questions, and also because I simply have not developed all of the Qapekbehtian scripts yet. So I'm just going to cover some major ones and how I evolved them from each other. So, introduction. The Qapekbehtian script is by far the most diverse in the world of Tjer, the world which they inhabit. They contain countless actual individual scripts from all sorts of parts of the world, from abugidas to alphabets, all of that. It is incredibly diverse, and also partially because of just languages teaching each other how to write, but also colonialism and expansionism. These scripts are also by far the most widely used in Tjer. As you can see here, especially this orange one, the Anyor script has been spread all across the world of Tjer through colonial efforts. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So our story begins with the Qapekbehtic logography, which developed in the Qapekbehtic region because this area, well, don't let the river system fool you. This here is a cold desert. And it's because of this, they can't really grow much food. They can't really raise many animals. It's too cold, and it's no grass, no plants or anything besides like along the bank of the river. So they had to trade for a lot of their goods. And because of this, the need arose to keep track of what they're trading for. And hence that system ended up developing into a proper writing system, which became the Qapekbehtic logography. Now, eventually, these people split off into multiple people groups. The Nashabjun ended up forgetting how to write because the trade systems hardly ever got up to that point in the river system, so they kind of just stopped needing to write so they forgot how to write. The Kashushab and the Shetfekut each developed their own hybrid abjad logography systems, increasingly complex. Won't get into those because they ended up going extinct anyway. What is important, though, are the systems of the Tuan nadu, which was a sort of syllabary abjad kind of thing, and the Bashuswad, which is a very simple abjad. It is these two scripts that would become the catalyst for all of the surviving Qapekbehtian scripts today. So if we go towards the south, trade between the Bashuswad and the Theonti people led to this fantastic script for the Theonti language. It was primarily inspired by this style of art, the Awafolla, which, as you can see, has a lot of strong, long calligraphic pen strokes to form this kind of art. This art was very popular. It was very close to Theonti culture, and so this ended up aesthetically influencing the way that they wrote, as you can see in the writing system. Now, as the Theonti Empire grew, they eventually encompassed people groups within the Walan jungle and surrounding areas. Some ended up writing on leaves and had much curvier circular writing systems like the Balai. Some would end up writing partially in stone, partially in like leaves and stuff, and so you'd get scripts like the Tjkai. And others would end up writing like they would switch between stone and leaves and all that. And that's how you got things like the Tunuk script, which you see here. These are all fairly minor, so we won't really go over them, at least in any detail. What is interesting, though, is if you go further south, eventually script with the Nishkil people resulted in this fantastic script, which I took the liberty of taking inspiration from Georgian for, because that's one of my favorite alphabets in the real world. So I took some inspiration from that and created this for the Nishkil script. They also wrote on papyrus paper, like the theonti. However, they would end up inspiring the Hofwar script, and they did not write in papyrus. They had no stone. They only had stone. So as you can see, their script became much more angular. But the Angur people, they did have papyrus. So it ended up going from papyrus to stone, back to papyrus. And so that's why you have, even on this papyrus paper, more angular type lines in their writing. And it is, of course, this script, the Angur script, that would end up being spread across the entire world of Tjer via colonialism, and would become sort of our the equivalent to the Latin alphabet, in that, you know, when you discover a new language, you Anguricize it as opposed to Romanizing it. And so once moving on from the southward journey, there is an interesting thing that happened to the west. Trade between the Tuan nadu and the surrounding peoples resulted in contact with the which, for those of you curious, that's the IPA for those. And they would end up adopting the Tuan nadu alphabet, a modified version of it. The issue is, this is the phonology for Tuan nadu, whereas this is the phonology for Qapekbehtian. So as you can see, they're very different, and this would require some major adaptation. The Tuan nadu system, as I mentioned, was a syllabary. They had 3 vowels and a various array of consonants. So consonants would just be, each character was a consonant and a vowel. Pretty simple. So for most consonants, including the now extinct uvular series in Qapekbehtian, each just had their own characters mapped on. So the ma character was the m consonant, tsa was tsa, ha became h, easy stuff. For some consonants that did not exist in Tuan nadu, or did not have equivalents in Tuan nadu, they used specific consonant vowels, characters. So the character that was for the syllable ki became the palatal ka in Qapekbehtian. And then on top of that, you also have some characters that were written with 2 syllable characters stacked on top of each other, because that's how syllable clusters were denoted, is to just have 2 syllable characters on top of each other if it's a cluster. So daza, za, tasha, cha, and then the syllable in Tuan nadu was used as an aspiration marker. So pa became pa, ta, saha became ta, so on and so on. And because they had now used consonants vowel characters, they had to come up with new diacritics for the vowels in Tuan nadu. Okay. And so you ended up with this system right here. However, my friends, this would not be the end of the Qapekbehtian writing system. You see, papyrus was banned in Balshusuvad kingdoms because it was making writing way too accessible. As soon as the poor man knows how to write, you have yourself a problem, because now the poor man can rise up against the wealthy people. They now have access to all sorts of knowledge that was never available to them before, and with knowledge comes power. So papyrus was actually banned in the Balshusuvad kingdoms. However, they were smart traders, of course. They still bought papyrus from the theonti and sold it to all their neighbors, because who cares if our neighbors end up being overthrown, you know? It's like that. So the Qapekbehtian would eventually adopt papyrus writing. Now, ink, actually, despite being traded as well, and that was used by the theonti and their, like, the people they inspired, ink was harvested from actual cuttlefish in the Theonti Gulf. And ink spoils when traveling, so it could not travel all the way from the Balshusuvad kingdoms to the Qapekbehtian. The Qapekbehtian, as mentioned, lived in the middle of a desert, Everyone else had either coastal access or access to a lake that had cuttlefish where they could get their ink, but not the Qapekbehtic. So what they ended up having to do was writing with styluses into the papyrus. They had to basically carve into the papyrus very lightly so as to not tear it. What this ended up with was very curvilinear, non-intersectioning lines. And what the result of that was that this lovely angular stone carvings would eventually transform into this much more curvilinear, much more uniform system. As you can see here, so character consonant cluster combinations would merge into each other at their tips, as well as the vowel diacritics merging into the actual consonants themselves. And that would be pretty much the end. Or would it? There is one last thing that I feel is important to cover, that being the rise of the pencil. My friends, today I have shown you all sorts of scripts, all sorts of different, angular scripts, all sorts of different shapes and sizes of writing systems. But there's one thing that would change all of that pretty much. In today's world, whether you're writing Mandarin Chinese or with the Latin alphabet, the shapes are ultimately actually going to be not that different beyond the actual complexity of the characters. That is because of the rise of the pencil. In the later years of Tjer's history, the invention of the pencil would lead to a morphing or a sort of neutralization of all these wonderful shapes. The therein script, these beautiful thick lines, would eventually just become this much more uniform shape. The Angur script would eventually mold into something more like this. You'd think the curvilinear scripts of the Qapekbehtic could not change because they're already curvy, while the invention of lined paper would make the exact boundaries in character connections much easier to see, and would ultimately, and still, once again, you would not get any change in that thickness of lines as you wrote on, unless you added it purposefully, which of course no one would do because that's just a waste of time. And even our conservative friends, the Boshulvad, would end up being the first to develop capital and minuscule letters, as you can see here with the pencil. So the pencil would end up making writing accessible to the masses. It would end up making writing all uniform and shaped. And ultimately, it is the pencil that would result in the destruction of all the beautiful shapes that I spent so long designing in multiple sketch programs. And so, with that in mind, I hope this has been informative. I hope this has been interesting to hear me talk about. Thank you so much for watching. If you are curious, my email is on screen here, and you can see more stuff. I hope to upload more stuff about this fantasy world and languages on my YouTube channel, Time for Tjer. Beyond that, are there any questions?
Thanks so much,
or if we have
Benjamin.
time for questions?
Oh yeah, you took 13 minutes 15 seconds, so we have time for questions. Your ending there of destroying parts of the scripts reminds me of Stephen King's "Kill Your Darlings."
Yeah.
The first question I noticed in YouTube, there's a lot of conversation happening in the YouTube channel, people discussing different types of orthographies, pteroglyphs, logographs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm having a little bit of a hard time parsing out what's a conversation and what's a question for you. But Alex Fink asked, on the, quote, Journey to the West script, sorry, I forgot the name, was using the vowels in the syllabary unsuitable, even if the new sign wouldn't read new, why not na-u?
So it's not so much that it's not so much that it wouldn't read nu. It's that they had additional vowels, so they would need to the original plan was to come up with like new syllable characters for these new vowels, but then they realized, right, we also have many more consonants than the Tuan nadu. So it ultimately just became an issue of we can't come up with new characters out of the blue. So we're going to use these characters that already exist to represent our new consonants that they don't have, and then just add diacritics for vowels. So it's more that they needed characters for these new consonants more than they needed characters for a specific new syllable, if that makes sense.
It does to me. I mean, certainly from some of my own orthographies that I worked on when a language, not quite the same, became an abjad, they lost any original characters for vowels. So then, thousands of years later, when they decided they wanted to write distinctive vowels again, they had to invent completely new vowels. So they took one consonant series from what was originally a syllabary, and it lost the vowel connotation, and then had to repurpose things later. So I think that's similar to what you did. Is that, am I?
Yeah, I think so. Somewhat.
Somewhat, yeah. You show that the pencil and line paper changed the characters/letters. Does one alphabet take the lead the way English became the business language for the world?
So like I mentioned, right, the Angyur script does become this version of this world's version of the Latin alphabet, in that most languages are transcribed, especially languages of colonialized peoples or colonized peoples get it transcribed into the Angyur script. Unlike in our world, there doesn't end up being one single. So the Arkao language in this world does end up becoming to a large extent the global language, but not to the same extent English is today. It's a bit hard for me to explain. But yes, the Arkao language, which uses the Angyur script, is probably I guess this world's equivalent to English, and the Angyur alphabet in particular is an incredibly powerful force in transcribing new languages and the like.
Question from Daniel Soto about the geography of the map in relation to the distribution of the languages. And Daniel wants to know if you have a geographical map and a language map to see the relation between the geography and languages.
I do not have a language map yet. I'm still working on that. I want to at least partially develop all the different branches of this world's languages before I make a proper language map. But I believe, show off a script map that shows the usage of various writing systems around the world. That if you want, you can go back and look at. I'm not sure how to actually share it.
Okay. A Walker Scott asks, wouldn't the inherent lininess of the papyrus have done the same thing that line paper did, only hundreds of years earlier?
So it's not actually the paper that caused the change in shape. It is the pencil. So before, you would write on a feather pen. Ballpoint pens, again, were invented after the pencil in this world. So you have feather pens where you cut it at a diagonal line, so you end up with wider strokes for the ink, and you will have styluses as opposed to pencils. So it's not actually the writing surface. You're right. If they had pencils when they had papyrus, that inherent lininess would have happened earlier, but it's not actually the writing surface that caused the change. It was the writing tool.
I'm going to butcher the pronunciation of this YouTube name, but Zarinus159 left you a note. And then the question, do any of the smaller scripts go extinct in favor of other more influential local scripts?
Yeah. Sorry about that. No, that's my partner there. So yes, so I mentioned briefly the Hofwar script that did go extinct in favor for the Angyur script, as well as various other scripts. So the way it works is basically the Hofvar were the first people, were the first of the Anguric peoples to write. They spread those writing systems all across what is Lake Angur. However, only the Angur people of which would develop the Angur Empire would actually have their script become powerful. All the other scripts would be wiped out pretty much.
That's awesome.